Good evening. My name is John Hepting Sr. I was born August the 20th of the year 1836 in Württemberg, Germany. Württemberg, Germany is at the southwest bottom corner of Germany. My parents, Adam and Anna Marie, were married in 1833 in Württemberg. In the year 1846, there was crop failures in Germany as well as potato blight, and the economy was poor. So much so that in 1847 that violence broke out in the cities. But we got out in 1846. We got on a boat and headed for New York City. It was mom, dad, my three siblings, and myself. We arrived in New York City minus one of our siblings. My youngest brother died on the journey. And once we got to New York, my eldest sibling decided to stay there. The rest of the family moved down to New Orleans, and we got a place on Magazine Street on Christmas Day, and we started a furniture company. In the year 1850, we moved from Magazine Street in the market area here to the village of Mechanicham. In the year 1860, I married Mary Donauer, and we had 10 children. Being here in Gretna, I was part of the Hook and Ladder Fire Company, which was founded in 1841. It was originally a bucket brigade. 3 years later on, they bought a hand pumper, and they drew water from wells that was in the streets as well as cisterns that were in people's backyards. As a member of the Hook and Ladder Fire Company, upon my death in 1909, I was the oldest member of the fire company as well as the honorary president. I was also part of the Hook and Ladder Exempt Society. We ran this very cemetery. In the year 1874, we had a name change. We changed our name to the Davy Crockett Volunteer Fire Company number 1. And 2 years later on, we got our first steamer. When we had the name change, we decided to choose the name of Davy Crockett, because Davy Crockett, who was a statesman for Tennessee, was a volunteer who went to the Alamo and there laid his life for Texas independence. And that was in the year 1836, the same year I was born, in the same year that the village of Mechanicham was founded. And so we took him as our namesake because of his volunteerism. He had a motto: be sure you're right and then go ahead. And that is the motto of the David Crockett Volunteer Fire Company number 1. And the Volunteer Fire Company now is the oldest continuously active volunteer fire company in the United States. In 1876, when we bought our first steamer, we paid for that, but then we had no money left over. So we had no money to buy a horse or to take care of one. So we had to basically pull the steamer to where it was going. We put the cart before the horse. But across the street from the fire station was a baker who had a horse. And sometimes he would let us borrow his horse to be able to move the steamer to where the fire was. Another position that I held was with the police jury of Jefferson Parish. Now, police jury is a governing body in the parishes that was founded in the 1900s to kind of keep everything in place. It was replaced eventually by the Jefferson Parish Council and Parish Council President. I was a secretary for the police jury for a little while. Probably the most memorable thing that I did on the police jury was that in 1891, in March, there was a farmer in Amesville, the bottom of Marrero, Ames Boulevard, who decided that he was going to put a pipe through the levee so that he could water his crops. Now, mid-March, you have all the waters melting from the snows. The Mississippi River is very turbulent. And so by sticking a pipe through a solid levee, he created a hole, which over time of 3.5 months, it grew to 1,000 foot wide. And so the waters from the Mississippi River were flowing downwards into the city of Gretna and also into Algiers, reaching to the porch steps of people's houses, and they had to travel around by boat. But in mid-June, 2,000 people got together and built a bulwark to divert the waters, and thus the flood was ended, and the Great Crevasse of 1891 is just history. Some of the other things that I did here in Gretna was that I was on the building committee for the Gretna Academy, and also the building committee of Salem Lutheran Church. I was a trustee of Salem Lutheran Church and also a founding member of the Lutheran Church. A few of the businesses that I had here in Gretna was I had the John Hepting Saloon here, pictured. That was at 238 Copernicus Street, which we now know as Huey P. Long Avenue. It's across the street from the Texas and Pacific Rail Depot. And so the workers would come over, have a nice drink, and if they had too much, then we had the Railroad Exchange Apartments on the top, where we would rent them a room. So that way, we got a lot of money out of these rail workers. And of course, I was the engineer. That. Another thing that happened is 1871. I bought the property between 2nd and 4th Street on the west side of Copernicus for $475. In the year 1900, I built my moss factory, the old reliable Crescent Moss Factory. And there we processed Spanish moss for building materials, for packing materials, for insulation, for car seats, for mattresses, for furniture, all the different uses for that. And so that was one of the ways that we were able to make a living. Now, Spanish moss is neither Spanish nor moss. It is actually a flowering plant that grows on oaks and cypress, and it's the cousin of the pineapple. It's related to the pineapple, and so it grows upon the trees. And so my workers would go out to get the Spanish moss, pull it from the trees. Now, one of the things about Spanish moss is that spiders and snakes and bees and bats kind of like that material. So when you're pulling down the moss, you have to watch out for what might fall down upon you. Now, I always told my workers not to take any of the moss off the ground because of the chiggers. Now, chiggers don't grow in the Spanish moss in the trees. They live in the grass. But if the moss is in the grass, then the chiggers can get attached. So probably the thing that happened that is most memorable or most infamous is the fact that I used to sell moss to the Ford Motor Company for their Model Ts. And one of Ford's first recalls was on their car seats because the car seats had chiggers. Oh, and that came back to bite me in the butt. So eventually the Moss Company, when I died in 1909, was inherited by my children. In 1920, they moved it to Estelle. By the year 1929, the Moss factory had closed down because now they had different materials that they were using for car seats and for mattresses and other things. So basically, we lost the business because there was no more need. I lost my lovely wife, Mary, in the year 1888. And so it took me 21 years to meet her again. I died on August the 24th of the year 1909. I was a faithful Lutheran and a good example to my community and to my family. And now I lay here in state, awaiting the day of the resurrection. And I thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight to learn a little bit of my story and also the story of the great city of Gretna in which we live. And I hope you take back with you some warm memories of the cemetery tour and understand how we stand on so great a foundation living in this city. Thank you again for coming on this tour. It has been a pleasure to let you know about my life. John Hepting Sr., wishing you a good night.